Hi everyone, this is Rob Watson, the module leader for TECH2503 Community Media Production, and this is the short overview of the 13th lecture for our lecture series. We're past the halfway point. And this is about, what's the title of this lecture, is kind of being social and collaborative. So in the past, what we've done is kind of quite intensively looked at the idea of sustainability and the role that community media can play in the social environment for redevelopment and kind of future challenges, climate change, urbanization, automation, those kind of things. And what we really want to think about now is kind of changes within media itself that kind of play a part in this, and what the role of community media might be in refocusing some of these issues, or allowing people to adopt a pattern of participation and engagement which reduces the level of marginalization. So we kind of look at this in the sense of thinking about what the changes are to the kind of what we might call media structures, and how they relate to the democratic processes that we want to facilitate and support. So our first thing to look at is the idea that the concept of marginalisation, and the way that, if you like, there's a kind of an argument that it's what Andrew Feenberg calls calls the kind of trade-off theory. It's almost like the kind of the what's the size of the cake, the zero-sum game idea, is that if you increase one person's size of the cake, you have to reduce it for somebody else, and that's not the case. The cake can be grown, and if you're stuck in a model of thinking which is to imply that what I give to you, you take from me, is a misnomer. It's a wrong way of thinking. Actually, what I give to you gives me more. That should be our argument and our way of thinking, which is a more sustainable approach. So we'll look at this in the context of, if you like, the way that technology shapes our sense of what our media is, and how it kind of our sense of modernity in the world is kind of employed as a tool, but a tool which isn't neutral. It isn't something which is value free. It's actually used for specific aims and for specific social objectives. And it's that idea of kind of the kind of all things being equal. We should see a particular change, but the world doesn't. People particularly, but the world might work like that, but people don't. Not everything is equal, and not everybody is coming at issues from the same point of view. So if we change the technology, if we change the underpinning platforms, then do we change the nature of the way that people engage? And I think we've seen this. So I suppose a good question to ask is technological change in media, does it bring about change in society? Is it something that reforms? So we would not have such an interest in community media or social media if the things that people do, writing blogs, sending tweets, sharing images of kittens, whatever it is, they exist beyond the technologies of mainstream media. Excuse me. So how does that work? How what brings about levels of social change? And it's really the idea that we're thinking a framework, and we can adopt different frameworks. Paradigms is the phrase, is the core phrase. And as we change these frameworks, our understanding of the world changes. But don't mistake the framework for the world, because the framework is a way of looking at the world, mediating the world, but it's not as the world as it is. It's just a way of understanding. So actually we can change our engagement with the world by changing the framework and understanding. So we inherit particular worldviews, and we inherit a sense of belonging, and we inherit a sense of identity. That's what culture is. It's that kind of how things are passed on. It's what language is. It's what our forms of communication, the things that the patterns and the roots are not, that open up to us. They're not random. We're guided by social expectations. So how do we take up these new forms of media that are introduced? How do we achieve the goals? What's the context? What's the kind of what's the short run and the long run issues that we need to consider? Where is it that we need to step in and really force change? Where is it that we can step back and let change happen incrementally and naturally, if you like? All of these questions are really important, because certainly for community media, we want to offer an alternative view of media entitlement. Who is entitled to speak? Rich and powerful people, corporate organisations, individuals, communities, localities. That's the nature of the discussion around community media. So we're talking about something which is about boundaries that shift and change. And we're talking about the kind of, we live in a world now which is defined by network collaborations, not necessarily by neighbourhoods. So your sense of identity, your sense of belonging comes from a kind of an interconnectedness which is related to our electronic engagements, rather than necessarily the people that we pass on the street and the people that we see in our local shops. We might that might be something that we ignore. So does the forms of technologies that we adapt, how do we adapt a kind of form of use of technology which is more open to change? Or do we want to restrict and narrow the parameters around which we introduce technology? So this is all part of a set of social conversations which have introduced in more recent years kind of technologies of cooperation, so wikis, collaborative forums, YouTube, being able to share videos like this. And I suppose what our aim is to live in a world which is defined not by other people but by ourselves. So we become part of self-governing communities, self-governing groups, rather than something which is determined for us. We are self-determined. And I think the whole kind of ethos of community media around that notion of self-determination is crucial, is very important, that people have their own voices, they express the issues and talk about the issues that are of concern to them, and that they are supported by a framework of regulation and governance and financial stability which empowers people to use their voices and not work against them and disempower them. So, right, a lot to get through as usual. For some reason on these notes, I've just noticed that we'll be looking at the history of tea in Britain. I can't remember why I've put that in there, but there we go. We'll see what comes to mind on the day. The notes are up on the DMU Commons wiki. Just go to wiki.our.dmu.ac.uk and search for the TECH2503 section. If you want to follow up any of the issues that are discussed in the lecture, go to DMU Talk. So that's talk.our.dmu.ac.uk. But I'll see you at the lecture.